everybody. Professor Karavik coming to you from the biology bunker here. This week we are moving on to classical genetics, the study of how we discovered genetics. And you'll learn more about genetics in detail when you take, genetics, which is a course here in the biology department. But this study began with this guy, Gregor Mendel. And Gregor Mendel was a monk. He was, actually, he lived not too far from where my grandma is from in Czechoslovakia. And he actually failed his test to become a college professor or a teacher. And so he studied pea plants instead because he was interested in biology and he had a lot of free time. So a few things we need to know from previous chapters or just previous knowledge of biology to get the most out of this chapter. One, diploid organisms have two copies of each chromosome. You know that already. They have homologous chromosomes. You get one from your mom, one from your dad. So let's say that's chromosome number 1. Or in the case of sex chromosomes, they may not be homologous. Like if you're a male, you'll get a Y and you'll get an X, right? That you get one from mom, one from dad. Chromosomes contain units of heredity called genes. So on a chromosome, you might have a gene right there for like eye color. And let's draw another chromosome. Let's say these are homologous chromosomes. They both have eye color on them. Different versions of a gene are called alleles. So you might have a brown eye allele on this one and a blue eye allele on that one. Okay? And the other thing we need to remember is that gametes are haploid, so N, they only have one copy of every chromosome. So if this were in one of your somatic cells, your gamete, let's say you make an egg, your gamete would only have one of those chromosomes in it. Okay? So those are things to keep in mind to help us understand the topic. Now let's get some more terminology down then. So, alleles. Now, flower color. Color is a character. Okay? And which color you are is known as a trait. That's kind of the terminology the book uses. Now, let's put all this into context. Okay, some words here. So, we have alleles. So, for flower color, which is a character, there are different alleles, so versions of a gene. So there's a gene for flower color, right? And it comes in different kinds, white and purple. And we symbolize purple with a capital P and white with a little p. Why? Because purple is dominant, as we'll see in a second. Okay, genotype are which two copies you have. Remember, you have two of these flower color chromosomes. So here's one and here's another one. Now the question is, do you have a big P and a little p? Two big P's or two little p's, right? So which two you have is your genotype. And if you have a big P, it always is put first. So here's little p, that's a possibility of a genotype. Big P, or big P, little p, okay? And then lastly, phenotype, that's the expression. Remember when we go to DNA to RNA to protein. Proteins are what gives flowers their colors and how we get flower color and all of that. Enzymes that lead to flower color are proteins, right? So phenotype, that's how you look or the expression of the gene. So little p, two white alleles, that makes the flower white. Big P, two big P alleles, that makes the flower purple. And in this case, big P, little p, having one of each, that still makes you purple. That's why we say that purple is dominant. If it's present, it overshadows the white allele. It's dominant. So, Gregor Mendel was interested in heredity. Back in the day, no one really understood how traits were passed on from mom to dad. And this is a little bit before Darwin, and actually kind of during Darwin's studies is when Gregor Mendel is working. So to put that in perspective, close to the era of the American Civil War. Okay, Charles Darwin is born the exact same day as Abraham Lincoln, if you want to put things into perspective. And Gregor Mendel was alive during Darwin's lifetime. Okay, so why study peas? Mendel's interested in heredity. We didn't know how it worked. We thought organisms just sort of blended together, like mom and dad blend together somehow to make an offspring. But we didn't know if there were rules to this or how it worked or what structures were passing these traits on. We knew nothing. Remember, at this time, we don't know what chromosomes are. We don't know what DNA is. We don't know what genes are. So Mendel comes up with what we call the particulate theory of inheritance. Particulate, meaning some particle is being passed from one generation to the next, from one parent to the offspring, some kind of particle, and that's all he knew. Okay, but he was able to figure that out by decades of meticulous research. Okay, so first of all, he saw that other research showed that pea plants could hybridize, meaning you could take one kind and cross it with another kind and get a new kind. Well, that would be a good way to study inheritance, right? And he could buy lots of different pea plants. They were available. So in science, we often use what we call model organisms. Model organisms are organisms we use to study. Maybe we're not really that interested in peas for their own sake, but they allow us to understand rules that apply to all living things. And we pick models that are easy to grow in the lab, easy to understand, easy to get to reproduce. And that's why we study fruit flies, to understand human biology, right? So never believe some stupid congressperson who's like, well, we're going to defund fruit fly research because we're only interested in humans. Fruit flies are how we understand humans. We're all related evolutionarily speaking. Therefore, we can learn from other organisms and apply it to humans. Okay, peas are small and easy to grow in the lab. Another reason why they're an excellent model organism. They can self-fertilize or be cross-fertilized. They can make babies with themselves. They make sperm and egg in the same plant. Or you can breed them with another plant. It gives you lots of options. And he made sure to start only with true breeding individuals. What the hell does that mean? Well, if an individual is true breeding, let's say it's purple. And let's say you make babies with itself. All of its babies are 100% purple. That's what true breeding means. That means there's no white alleles in that individual. Or if you have a white individual, if it has babies with itself, it only makes white babies. Okay? That's true breeding. We now know why. That's because this purple flower has the genotype big P, but Mendel didn't know that yet. Okay? He figured that out. Okay. One other thing, I mentioned that above, characters versus traits. When your book talks about characters, it's talking about things like flower color or height. Traits are which versions of that or which alleles of that were displayed. White, purple, etc. Okay? He didn't just look at flower color. We tend to focus on color, but he did flower color, but he did where the flowers were found on the axis. Axial flowers grow on the side of the plant versus terminal on the tip. Yellow versus green peas, round versus wrinkly peas, inflated versus constricted pods, green versus yellow pods, and tall versus dwarf plants. That's a lot of stuff, but that let him do lots of replications and to see if his patterns held true over and over again. And this has a lot of data on it that's really important to understand what Mendel figured out. Notice that he did breeding experiments here, and they have the data over here on the side of the table. We'll come back to that here in a little while, or we'll mention it as we go. Now, how does he start? How does he start his experiments? First, he starts with true breeding plants. Flowers that only make white offspring or when they breed with themselves, and flowers that only make purple offspring when they breed with themselves, for example. And the first generation that he starts with is known as P, which is stands for parental. Okay, P generation. Now, he doesn't know all the things we're showing on here, but you do. So we're going to show you things that Mendel did not know. This flower is big P, big P. This one is little p, little p. When they make gametes, see, they're diploid, so they have two copies, right? When they make gametes, only one copy goes into the gamete. So the gamete from the purple flower has a big P in it. The gamete from the white flower has a little p in it. And then they come together to make the F1 generation. F1, F stands for filial. I don't know if there's one or two L's in filial, but that stands for like offspring, okay? So F1 generation stands for offspring. And this is the first set of offspring produced by the parents. And when he did this, he bred purple with white, and he saw that all of them came out purple. Every single one. 100% purple. But these flowers are not true breeding. See, they have a purple allele and a white allele. So then what he did is he bred these with themselves or with other flowers produced the same way for the F2 generation, the second offspring generation. So the grandparents of the parental generation. And when he did that, he found 3 purple to 1 white flower was produced. And he did this for other traits as well. You can see all of these come up with roughly a 3-to-1 ratio, and you can see the actual numbers involved. 705 to 224 flowers were purple versus white, and that's a roughly 3-to-1 ratio, right? Now, Mendel didn't know anything about gametes. He didn't know anything about genes. He didn't know anything about alleles. He's able to figure it out based purely on math and observation, and we'll talk about what he figured out in an upcoming lecture.